and its relation, and certainly its relationship to our modern laws, its relationship to our societal norms. But also for me, I think this kind of initiatives and elsewhere that are related to it, it's also Islamic because it's faith-based. And we can understand faith-based in a variety of ways, but it's a faith-based, at least the common ground is really taking the Islamic tradition, the Quran and the Islamic tradition seriously, considering it a very important source of our normative framework as a source of spiritual teachings, right? So, and it doesn't shy away from that. It does not shy away from that. Okay, and then let me just go to the, and then, sorry guys, I'm trying to see the cursor. But, ah, I'm not so good with computer. Hang on, bear with me. Okay, go back. Yes. And I think this kind of initiative, and let's think also how Kufi represents that. Part of it is very much about knowledge building, very, very much so. And in that knowledge building, I want to systematize it, understand it in a more systematic way. And I say it usually involves, and I've seen it in a number of initiatives that I've studied, but I would say ideally it should involve two things: deconstruction and reconstruction. The deconstruction would be very systematically as we work on our textual tradition and also work on our lived realities and our laws, really try to understand how patriarchy is formed, whether it's as a policy or whether it's as a religious normative, and in a very concrete way. For example, when we have certain concepts that are thrown at us, and some concept like qiwama, understood as a patriarchal concept, and says, okay, you can't have egalitarian divorce laws because of qiwama, right? Or daraja, it's meant, yes, it is mentioned in the Surah Al-Baqarah, right? But then when it becomes a patriarchal concept, hey, men have daraja over husbands, over wives, end of story, and it stops the discussions. So I think so we need to also evaluate what we do when we produce knowledge in that way. In what way we are really producing and making explicit how, and demystifying and unpacking how these kinds of concepts have become kind of like the building blocks of this patriarchal discourse. That becomes an obstacle to reforming laws. That becomes a way of justifying a patriarchal religious discourse in our societies. That's one part of it. But the other part that I think is very important, which Kupi does, and I've had the privilege of seeing Noor Rufia present also, is how you critically engage with the conventional methodologies of producing religious knowledge, like the way fatwa conventionally has been produced, right? What the muftis generally, what are their starting points? What are the tools that they use? What are the resources that they use? And how can we rethink that and say, wait a minute, there are new things that you need to add on. How do you really take into account the lived realities? And I remember she presented a beautiful and very effective example of Kupi fatwa on child marriage, and how do you make that case? Which means this is an example of how you rethink these methodologies as well and say there's a need for new methodologies. So that's also, I consider it part of a deconstruction. Then comes the second part, which I think is important, because the first part, I see it as diagnosing the problem, right? And the two parts are not separate. The second part for me is reconstruction. And it means, first of all, and I link it back to the title that you chose for this seminar, theological activism. So I see also the importance of this work, like Kupi and others, in what way it can really make us rethink central understandings of theology and ethics. Where it doesn't stop only at gender. For example, when Noor talks about justice haqiqi, or faqih works on mubadala, how that can also enrich and help us have a new theological understanding, a new ethical understanding, a new lens to look at our text a new lens to understand at our Islamic norms, so that then mubadala, justice haqiqi, and others, and you know the different Quranic values that Kupi works on, how that also becomes a new lens in which we rethink and re-understand and re-engage with our texts, so that the value, the benefit, the mardut, as we say in Arabic, is theological as well, is ethical. It's not confined to the question of gender inequality also, right? So that's one part. And then the other part, which is extremely important, and I think they should be linked together as well as part of the reconstruction, is of course new readings of these gender laws. You know, like for example, can we revisit polygamy? Can we revisit definitely unilateral repudiation and men's right to just unilaterally end the marriage? So provide alternative readings that can become then the arguments for new Muslim family laws. So these two things. But I think if we think of them as interconnected, it's really important, and also in a way makes this project transformative, as Fatma was saying, so that it's and also locates it in a more comprehensive way as part of a larger multidimensional reform project that is not only that sees the question of gender inequality not separate but as a part of a larger reform project. So, and usually the deconstruction and the reconstruction part, for me, they are interlinked. They're not, you know, they're not separate. They're not neat boundaries between them. But I would like us, and I invite us to think of these different initiatives as we learn about them and evaluate them and discuss them. In what way? First of all, if you agree, is this a good model of understanding these initiatives, evaluating these initiatives, and what benefit we get from it? Okay, so that's the knowledge part, which I don't separate at all from the activism. They are very interconnected, as I said. But also, I think we need to understand very systematically in what way then this is concrete, on the ground forms of activism, which for me, first and foremost, and always needs to be knowledge based. And knowledge understood in a feminist way, not just one kind of knowledge, but different forms of knowledge that are equally, first of all, organically connected, the experiential, you know, and the rational, the spiritual, and also a knowledge produced through collective, self-reflective process, right? And the activism, I would say, and then we can talk about how we can perhaps reflect on Kupi within this context, needs to be multidimensional. It doesn't mean all of us have to do all these things at the same time. But then we have to think in what way we can build bridges and we can build alliances to do these different things. Because I believe these different dimensions that you see here on the slide are important, are relevant. The legal advocacy, the religious education, and by the religious education, I think Kupi is certainly doing that through the process of these fatwas, but also, and I see it like what Faqih does and Noor and the others, not in an unconventional creative way. So not only in religious seminaries, not only through which is important, but I'm saying that's not enough, by somehow creating the spaces where we have more female and male feminist religious voices in the religious institutions and the religious schools. That is good, that is important. But I think religious education in the sense of how we create our own spaces to impart that kind of religious knowledge by maybe reading circles, by while we're doing the activism itself, how that can become a process of learning where we relearn together the textual tradition in a systematic way, and we think of our activism as also a space for that religious education, because I believe that is extremely important, extremely empowering, right? And it leads to the creation of religious discourse, which is so important, especially in our countries where our family laws are drawn in fiqh, albeit in a hybrid ways. And the other thing that I want to explore is to what extent these kinds of initiatives can really impact in a positive way or in a at least tangible way cultural norms, movies, novels that we read, songs that we listen to, the cultural environment that is around us, that is very much part of our life. In the and what do I mean by that? In what way that this somehow doesn't only become something within our own echo chambers, or those of us who are activists slash scholars, but also then somehow we contribute to changing language, changing how people talk about gender relations, how people revisit hierarchical relationships. So I also want us to reflect on how we can make those linkages, right? To those people that work on that, in what way can we make a headway in that area? Because I think, again, that's another dimension of the change that is necessary, that is important, right? Okay, and then another thing that I want to leave you with is, I think in these different kinds of which I call myself Islamic feminism activism, and I call it feminism, not feminist, because I don't want to impose that identity on anyone. But feminism, the way I understand it and the way I presented it, is how do we talk to and build bridges with stakeholders who don't think like us, but who are aware of the problems, who share some of our concerns, who might not believe in gender equality, but are noticing that hierarchy, legal inequalities, religious-based inequalities are really not good for our families, are not good for our societies. And there are these stakeholders. And I'll just give you a very quick example. Noor, how much time do I have?
3 minutes. Sorry, I forgot to
Okay,
remind you.
I'll be
Yeah.
good. I'll stick to it.
Okay.
An example. So one thing that is very noticeable, very visible in different Islamic feminist initiatives, and I would put Kupi in it, is really the focus on Quranic ethics and understanding it systematically and reclaiming it, and putting forward a framework that uses that as a building block to revisit Islamic legal tradition, right? And you see that also in other initiatives in other countries. We can talk about them in Egypt, I'm sure Fatma, of course, can talk about South Africa and others, right? Now, I have also seen in my research, and for example, some recent research we've been doing in Musawa, that, for example, in Egypt, Al Azhar and Al Awqaf, the Minister of Endowment, for a number of years now, almost 10 years, they've been running these marriage training program for newlyweds, people who are about to marry or people who got married, right? And we studied these programs, right, in some research we've been doing in Musawa recently. And I know also, for example, in Indonesia was part of that research, of course. And I don't know if our colleague is here, Irma. Is she here? Maybe I would like to say salam to her. But in Egypt, when we attended these programs and interviewed the people doing it and all that, we noticed there was real focus on revisiting and questioning and problematizing male hierarchy in marriage, male authority in marriage, but from an ethical perspective, from the perspective of this is not good for the family, this is not good for our well-being, right? So my thought to you, and I'll end there, is can we find together ways of identifying common concerns with actors who are important in this process, and they might not believe in gender equality, but they recognize the problems that are faced, that are result from gender hierarchy, and how can we work with them? Because I think that's important. I don't think we should be just working with ourselves. How can we somehow create the spaces for collaborative work with actors like that? And then I'll stop here. Thank you so much for the invitation. Okay, let me stop share. Okay, hang on. I'll
Thank
go
you
back
so
to,
much,
thank you.
Dr.
Okay,
Mufi.
thank you. I'll stop share if I can. I'm having a bad Zoom day. Okay, hang on.
So,
Uh, mm, uh, uh, can you stop it from your end? Because I'm trying to.
wait.
Okay, hang on. No, 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 no. Let me do it. I have to do it. I know. Okay, but I need to make the thing bigger.
You just
Okay.
stop sharing. There is a thing.
Stop share.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Found it. Found it. Finally.
Okay.
Sorry. Okay, thank you.
We
Okay.
call in Indonesia, we are colonialists, not millennial.
I know.
Thank you so much for your
I know.
insightful reflection. So your emphasis on ethical reasoning, dialogical hermeneutic, deconstruction, reconstruction, and also the shared moral space that Kupi opens between scholars and community beautifully complement Dr. Fatima's framing of feminist jurisprudence. Now we will open the floor for discussion, but um, as we still have like 60 minutes for the discussion, I would like to invite Kang Fakih to respond Fatima about can we call women ulama in Kopi as Muftiat Mujadilat? And
Uh,
also, can we call Kopi as Islamic feminist movement?
no, I will not answer, but I have reflection for Kupi. I will talk on my perspective, of course, but now I just want to say thank you very much. And for me, Kupi is not either dutiful daughters and debating woman muftiat, but both. Both mean Kupi is trying to be nisaun mutiatun within mujadilat. Not of patriarchal tradition, of course. And I have actually question for both in terms of a strategy for Kupi in Indonesia because we are heading to have a halakoh kubro or the midterm meeting of network of Kupi in December between the last Kupi or the second Kupi and the next Kupi or the third Kupi. So I will ask in the last session, not now, after the other question.
Okay. Okay, thank you, Kang Fakih. I think Kang Fakih is a little bit shy.
but but
Like,
but can I say something very
oh yeah,
quickly,
yeah,
Isma?
sure, sure.
Yeah.
Please.
So فقيه, but how about نساء مطيعات لله فقط
Yeah, 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 yeah.
ومجادلات? Because
Wamujadilah, that what I say. So not
مج...
all like Fatima.
Yeah.
but the point is مطيعات لله.
Yeah, mutiat lillah, khalifah lillah.
Mutiatillah certainly works. And the other formulation I offered was if they are dutiful daughters, they are not dutiful daughters of the patriarchy. They are dutiful daughters of
Ah,
khawla,
yeah.
Oh,
of
khawla. Yeah,
khawla.
yeah, I agree.
They're
That
khawla's
I agree.
daughters, right? So they
Yes.
are.
Yeah,
I
So if
I screenshot your that session, that picture and deliver to all Kupi that
yeah,
we are dutiful daughters of khawla.
That's a
exactly.
very good one. And if I may add, mujadilat would be true, very true to the Quranic pedagogy of tadabbur, reasoning, ألا تعقلون, ألا تسمعون. That is being true to the Quranic pedagogy. Yeah.
Exactly. Yep. No,
Okay.
agreed. We are on the same page.
Okay.
I will ask
So,
later.
yeah,
Okay.
please, everyone who might have question or comment, you can raise your hand or you can type your question or comment on the chat box. So while waiting for the response from the audience, I'm actually interested in elaborating the concept, or I don't know how can we call it. So Dr. Fatima explained us about the connection between law, fatwa, and society. And how can this connection work? I mean, fatwa can be a tool to make the law works in the society. So like what kind of context, or if there is enabling factors, so what factors that we should provide to make this connection work?
So I think the important aspect of making fatwa work in society is responsiveness, right? A fatwa is a question to a mufti about, and it's an inquiry about a problem, right? You're not inquiring about something that isn't a problem. You're inquiring about something that is problematic, something you're struggling to work through, something you want an answer, you want assistance. Your way of thinking about it hasn't yet, produced a response or a solution that's working. So you're looking for reasoning that must come from the historical law, but you're also wanting your mufti to think about that question in the present time, right? You're asking, I'm going to change my language now. You're asking your muftiya to think about it in the present time, right? Not just your mufti. Because we're talking about the Kupi context. So it needs to be responsive. And I think what we struggled with in the past, or even now, right? If we take the simple idea of talaq by pronouncement, right? The instant talaq, right? We ask, so we've done this regularly. We go to the ulama and we say, a man has announced talaq, in this situation, triple talaq at one go. And they immediately go into the law books and they come out and they say, yes, it's not the best kind of talaq, this is talaq bid'ah, but it is valid talaq, right? The talaq stands. And I'm talking about our context in South Africa. We work primarily with Hanafi law here. So it stands. And then you sit with a situation where women are divorced instantly, right? And there's no recourse for that woman in society because we live in a minority community. We don't have a system of Islamic law around us. We don't have the systems of family support. We don't have a Beit al-Mal. We don't have a place where she's going to get some sort of financial support. We don't have a situation, for many of our older women, the situation we have is that a woman hasn't worked for 30 to 40 years. And so she doesn't have her independent wealth. So what we would want would be for the mufti to take all of that into context, right? To first take that into context before they simply pronounced on this particular talaq. And the struggle is that they don't. So in order for it to actually be responsive, if you agree that that is a valid talaq that stands, for the woman that's been involved, you're actually producing an injustice. And then the experience of women who use the law is that the law is producing injustice. And that is the confusion in your mind and your heart. How does a law that I believe in, how does Sharia, according to me, because that's how people see it as Sharia, how does this give me justice? And that's where the function of the fatwa, you could say it's not meeting this idea of responsiveness. It's not responding to the contemporary need. Even though it might be valid, we need to have some sort of acknowledgement that it's not working in this context. And then we actually need to have a discussion amongst our ulama or those who are doing iftar to say, this is the way talaq is functioning in this society at this moment. Here is a new fatwa. Here's a fatwa which we all agree on, that when you do talaq in this way, these are the conditions. It will be, it will not be, valid, invalid. Here's the parameters in which you have to work. Here's a process in which you have to work. So in that way, fatwa is actually giving us process. It's giving structure to the law. It's giving us instruction that's helpful to make the law applicable and ultimately to produce the hakiki justice, like the full, complete sense of justice. That's responsiveness to me. It's not sufficient only to go into the history of the law and to the history of the, of the established opinions of the mashhur tradition, and then to bring that forward. It's not sufficient to do that. We have to engage it with what is significant and what is justice now. I like the idea of expanding notions of justice, that Islamic law and the fatwa allows our notion of justice to expand, to get bigger and bigger with time. Because what we think is justice now is not necessarily justice in 30 years from now.
Yeah, thank you. So the key point is responsiveness and taking it into the context. Yeah. I haven't seen anyone typed question or comment on the chat box. So I think
May
I
I?
still have Kang Faki.
Wahid,
Oh
Wahid
yeah,
itu.
please.
thank you very much, particularly for Ibu Fatimah Sidat and Ibu Mulki Sharmani, also Kang Fakih, and all of my friends here. As I listen to the argument and also the explanations about the positions of KUPI and its methodologies, it seemed like it sounds familiar for modern scholar who have tradition of Western scholarship, like the foundation of the ethics. It is based on the philosophy and also the foundation of the hermeneutics, which is it is coming from Western tradition. So my question is like this. Particularly for Ibu Fatimah and Ibu Mulki, is KUPI argument is familiar with the traditional understanding of Islam in Middle East or in Islamic mainstream tradition. Like what I learned from KUPI about the way to make a fatwa in a certain stance, like tasawwur. Tasawwur is the descriptions of the problems which we want to address in making the fatwa. In tasawwur, for me, it's very complicated and very, very sophisticated. Since in this stance, all of the social analysis we can use it, we can utilize that to understand about the things, about the problems that we want to face, that we want to make fatwa on. But it is for traditional Islamic scholars, it seems like, what do you call it? It's very odd. It is sad, or it is something like, it is not from Islamic tradition. If you want to understand about the dalil or about the text, and then we have to come back to the foundation of textual tafsir, like tafsir, traditional tafsir. So I just want to, I want your response, Ibu Mulki and Ibu Fatimah, as scholars that which coming from the Middle East tradition. Is it KUPI tradition, KUPI methodologies is acceptable in the Middle East, and how can we speak to them in make sense understanding of them? I mean that it is. What do you think about the methodology of KUFI, which is combined between Western tradition and Islamic tradition, makes sense for Middle East scholars? That is. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Mas Wahid, for the question. So, like, is there any epistemological foundation that can that we can use from Islamic tradition, and does it related to the methodological foundation offered or proposed by KUPI? So maybe Dr. Fatima or Dr. Mulki will respond first.
Fatma, do you want to go first?
I've spoken, so I don't mind if you go first. I'll go after you, Mulki.
Yeah. Okay, sure. And I think also, thank you so much, Waqid, for the question and the comment/comment. But I also want to invite our KUPI colleagues to respond to that so that this is a discussion because they are the ones whose hands are really into this methodology. They are the ones who've developed it and applied it. So they have a lot to say about that. So I'll just say, I think this is an important question. It's a common question, not only for Kupi, but I think the problem of the question also is our understanding of traditional and our understanding of Western. So, for example, when we say hermeneutics is Western, hermeneutics, the way I understand it, and it means interpretation. Okay, there are different methodologies of interpretation. We certainly have in Islamic tradition methodologies of how we do tafsir, how we do istinbat al-ahkam, how we do the illah. We all have that, right? So for me, I think the question is, and you are right that some people would say, hey, might say that's a question might arise. So you are absolutely valid to raise it. But the way we would address it, I would say, first of all, in general, I would say Kupi is located within Islamic tradition, but to be located with Islamic tradition, it does not mean you have to show that you understand the tradition very well. You have to show that you are knowledgeable about the methodologies, that you have to show in what way it's located, that you share with that tradition, the legal tradition, certain starting points. The Quran is important, the Sunnah is important, right? As a sources of law, that you are aware of the tools in that legal tradition. But what I would push against this idea that we just reproduce what was done by our fuqaha many years ago. If they were alive today, they would come up with new methodologies. They would develop their methodologies. And we all know, those of us who know and many of you are very well versed in Islamic tradition, that the Islamic legal tradition, very much the question of ikhtilaf is very important. The very idea that we have a majority opinion and a minority opinion, the nature of Islamic tradition says that dynamism is important, right? So what I have us think about is, do we only use the tools that they used and do not reproduce, do not think in terms of eclectic methodologies, for example, that come from social sciences? We need that. Methodologies that come from psychology, we need that, as well as legal tradition. So I would push against the idea that we just use what they used, right? And I would push against the binary of that this is traditional, therefore, and this is Western. That's how I would go about it. And what I would call us for is that to use eclectic methodology, as long as it's justified, robust, and it shows that it's located within the tradition, is exactly what we need. Exactly what we need. And one way of doing it also is, by the way, where we have perhaps workshops, and you are right, I'm thinking with you aloud, to have some workshops on the methodology with also religious scholars in different parts of the world, on the methodology of issuing a fatwa, on the methodology of rereading text in order to come up with ahkam.
Yeah, Dr. Fatima.
I wouldn't say anything too different, except to say that I think Indonesia represents a very unique confluence of Sorry, maybe we can just mute that person. Okay, I've muted them. Yeah, I think Indonesia represents a very unique situation. You have this sort of history of reform. You have this whole very strong injection of gender studies, right? Which we don't see in too many other Muslim communities, Muslim majority communities, like a strong movement of thought, of intellectual work that's happened in gender studies in Islamic universities. And I think that's been very, very important for your context. And then you have this integration of human rights law and your national law and the consensus building that you're trying to do in Indonesia amongst the various communities. I think that has played a very crucial role. And then, there's also, while that is very organized and, it comes together nicely, there's also the accidents of history, right? And one of the accidents, I think, is the sort of anti-radical, the shift against radical Islam that's been happening for many years, right? So that has also fueled a certain conversation about where reform needs to happen, and that a lot of it gets targeted at women. So it's a double-edged sword, right? Everybody wants to reform Islam for Muslim women, which means that Islam comes under attack. But at the same time, when Muslim women are able to use it for what matters to us, it can be beneficial for us. But we also have to be careful how we use it. So I think because it can be instrumentalized against us and our communities in a broader way. That's why I think what Mulki is speaking about, that it's not, what we do is not significant only for women, but it's about a broader transformation in society, and that's what we're interested in. So in that way, I think Indonesia is very unique. Whether this is transportable into the Middle East, I think it's a very good question. I don't know that it's transportable as it is. I think there'd be a lot more pushback, a lot more resistance if there was a kupi trying to establish itself next to Al-Azhar. I don't know how that would look like and what it would feel like. I think it'd be very different. So yeah, I don't know. I don't think it is so transportable. But what is important, I think that the lesson we can take is that Indonesia can be a lead. It can teach us, and it is teaching us. And the question is, how much is the heart of Islam willing to learn from the diaspora of Islam?
Yeah.
If I may add, and this is also to respond to perhaps Indra's question, it's not transported the same way in the Middle East, but I think we can start small. We can start small because there are also actors within these religious establishments that want to think differently, that are doing small scale reform initiatives. And I think that's where we can that's where we can interject and intervene and start small by building these bridges and doing that work together. Not a large initiative, but small steps. And it's important. It's not easy, but certainly there are these actors within the religious establishment who want to train also the teachers and the young generation of religious scholars in a different way. The question of gender might not be their main thing, and it doesn't have to be, but we have common grounds where we can work together. And that's where I see potential opportunities for change. But you are right, Fatma, I agree with you 100%. We just can't.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Fatima and Dr. Mulki, for your response. There is one participant asking about, I'm not sure whether I understand the question correctly, but I can read it. Does Islam not provide that the man divorcing his wife also give her a gift? I think it goes to Dr. Fatima, because earlier you explained, a case about talak. You might respond to this question. And another question is to Dr. Mulki. In the context of Indonesia, how can the reinterpretation of the Quran, grounded in its universal principles such as justice, adil, and equality or musawah, be effectively integrated into mainstream religious discourse and legal practice? And what strategies or methodologies do you propose to bridge the gap between progressive hermeneutics and societal acceptance? Yeah, please. Maybe Dr. Fatima, you can go first.
Yes, and Halimat, exactly. That is a provision in Quran, but it's almost, I mean, in South Africa, we know it by its absence because it barely exists. Instead, we have the narrative, Islam doesn't allow alimony, and yet if you look at this, people may argue it fulfills that kind of a function. It is a gift, it's a payment that's meant to be at the point of divorce. It's a Quranic instruction, but we almost never see it being applied. And that is the problem. And this is when we talk about male logics that inform things like divorce. So from your perspective, you're quite clear that this should happen. But I can tell you it almost never happens in South African Muslim law practice. And when we talk about it, we're told that, we're innovating. When you direct them to Quran, they've got 15 other reasons as to why it does not apply to any ordinary divorcing women. They'll tell you it only applies at the point of death, etc. Yet when you look at it, if you were to apply this, it would actually create some sort of justice at the end of a marriage. If somebody has been married, for 40 years, and you're leaving with nothing and no career, if you had some sort of fund that you could use, you could establish yourself in a career, you could get training. It's the kind of things you could do. So yes, you are right. And the problem is how the law is used.
Thank you. Dr. Mulki?
Yes, thank you for that question. And I would repeat what I said on one of the slides. It's first of all, it's a long-term work that we need to know. It cannot be done in several years. It's an ongoing work. Number two, it's a collective work. It has to be done by different people together, collectively. We need the women's rights activists, the religious scholar activists, lawyers. So the building alliances, building bridges are so important, so important. And then how we make those connections, right? Now, in your case in Indonesia, we always say in Musawa, like, mashallah, mashallah, we are. We hold you up in a pedestal. We learn so much with you, and we think that you've achieved great things. Like you have made really big strides. That's what I want to say. So some examples that I see, like I said, long-term, multidimensional, several people together working on different actors, working on different areas. Now, one of the things that I love that I know Faqih does and Noor does, in addition to working with grassroots, and doing the Kupi initiative, is this kind of like big, I know you have another term for it in Bahasa Indonesian, but like big reading circles where like 500 people, and where you get to discuss and reflect and present this knowledge, but not just impart it, but reflect on it, have a discussion about it. I think those are really effective. It's not the only answer, but I think they're so important because there are a lot of people, not only Indonesia, and you would know Indonesia much better than me, but I know, for example, in Egypt and other areas, and also Muslim minority context in the diaspora, where a lot of particularly young people, and also even older, are really hungry for this kind of knowledge. And they don't want this choice between either I choose my religion, or I choose that to believe in equality and justice, but I have issues and ambivalence or rejection about the Islamic law, Islamic legal tradition, or Islam more broadly, right? So that this would be my answer. Multiple strategies, and how do we systematically think about building these alliances and bridges and working together and doing this multidimensional reform? That's the only way I see it, and think of it as a way of life, not something that we're going to do for 2 years, 3 years, but a way of life, way of being. That, yeah. and link it. And I think in Indonesia you are doing it so well also in Kupi. I like also how you like and I think it's very good how you link it to other social justice issues. So it's about protecting the environment, it's about safety, it's about security, it's not only about preventing child marriage, which is important, but these connections are really important, yeah, because that's also how you get more people to join the alliance. Yeah.
Okay, thank you so much. There is one question, but Dr. Fatima already responded to it. So, what do female activists need in realizing the Kupi concept and promoting it on a global scale, such as strategies or institutional support and etc.? That's the question. Maybe Dr. Mulki can respond.
Noor,
So
can you explain? Noor is.
what do female activists need in, or maybe Kupi needs to realize or to disseminate, to promote the Kupi concept and also the methodology, etc., to the global scale?
Yeah, I think this is a very important question. Thank you for asking it. And um, definitely, I think because also promoting is one way of also evaluating it, reflecting on it. Other people will learn from it, but also it's a way of Kupi itself reflecting on what you're doing and how it speaks to other contexts and how you can build on it further in the Indonesian context. I would say, and I'm more than happy to be part of facilitating that in my own small way. Uh, that we need to organize some seminars or workshops or meetings where we meet with other people, like whether it's in Egypt or Finland or Malaysia or elsewhere, South Africa, where we bring together, other people who are working on something similar but not using this methodology, and then Kupi is presented. Definitely. And then we have this discussion. I think we need to do more of that. I don't know if you have already done that, but certainly I think that would be really important. You've already done the work of writing about it in this special journal issue. I think this seminar or conference is really important also, but I think also then the next step or an important step and hopefully beneficial step would be, can we organize some meetings elsewhere with other actors from other countries, Egypt, here in Finland, Malaysia. Malaysia, I'm sure you're already doing it, but other, Morocco, Tunisia. And we do have networks, we do have partners, and we are more than happy to facilitate that. And I think it would be really good and beneficial.
Okay, thank you. I think Kang Faki is here, and he is the member of how do we call it, the Majlis Musyawarah Kupi. So he will follow up. And
Manana also here. Manana
oh
also
yeah,
here.
Manana also here.
Nurofia also here.
We
Oh,
still
where's Nur
have
Rufi? I want
we
to
still
say
have
salam to Nur Rufia.
yeah. We still have 8 minutes, and I will give it to Kang Faki because he has questions to both of you, Dr. Fatima and Dr. Mulki. Please, Kang Faki.
Actually, the general things already presented by, because in Indonesia, the Kupi also facing problems and challenge. So why Wahid asked that? Because in the grassroots people, from where your knowledge? Is it there in Arabic? Where is the third? So that's why Wahid and etc. asking about this. I mean that the question is in the ground. So my question is about what do you think about the gaps that may Kupi have? Because Kupi is working not only in academic, but also in grassroots. And in the grassroots is still like um, uh, like the rigid boundaries between Islamic feminism and also about the Islamic identity. Actually, Kupi itself, when coming to the grassroots, Kupi used the Islamic identity. I mean the Islamic tradition, Islamic term, and etc. While the academic one, what I call frame Kupi as feminist activism. And which is true also because Kubi believe in the values of feminism, but this kind is like having a challenge and having problems in narrating that in the grassroots, and of course we don't want either weakening or sacrificing Islamic identity, not the Islamic values, values of feminism itself. The question is from outside, you as expert, as activist also, as feminist also, what the gaps that you see from outside in Kupi when they work in the grassroots, because we will having meeting we call Halakoh Kubro, or the big meeting in the midterm between Kupi second and Kupi third. So if there is something that you can share with us that we need to cover, we need to solve, we need to do for the Kupi next, of course, movement, and I agree this is the collective and many multidimensional, etc. But you might see some gaps or thing that we need to do in our movement. Thank you.
Yeah, please, Dr.
Fatma
Mulki
first.
or Dr.
No,
Fatima.
I think
will
Fatma
do.
first, please.
Okay, please.
Yeah, I don't think that I see gaps. I see challenges. I think you are asking about the challenges, Faqih. And the one challenge, it's the same challenge that my fellow country person has put, I think, into the questions. Aslam has asked, what do we do with the failures of feminism when the work that we're doing is associated with that and actually written off in that same way? It gets written off that this is feminist and so it's not relevant. Or, it's not relevant to the grassroots. We know it is relevant, but we also know that feminism as a construct has a history, and we engage it with that history, knowledgeable of that history. We're not ignorant of that, but we also claim the instruments that it provides us, the tools that it provides us. And maybe part of our work is to create new language, to articulate that in ways that are indigenous to us, right? So to call it Nisawiya, to call it whatever it is, and that we start speaking about it like that, right? That we might drop terms like feminism if they don't work for us, but keep them where they do work for us. So I think a very important thing is to find our own language, give ourselves language, bring language into, and it's producing language. We have to make that language. The other thing is, and I just want a simple example. So for example, capitalism is incredibly problematic to Islamic thought, to Islamic ideas of justice. But we sit in it so comfortably. If feminism is a problem, capitalism is a problem, because they're side by side. They've come into our countries. Colonialism has brought them in, imperialism, they've come in together. But we're very happy with nobody makes that sort of critique of capitalism. So I like to talk to, I like to push back with people with that kind of simplistic argument. But the other thing is to say that the work that we do, and I've learned this over 20, 30 years now, the work that we do, like Mulki says, is slow work. It is work that doesn't happen in a year or a decade even. It's very slow work, but it's important we do the work. So we leave it here for those who come after us, so they don't start from scratch. And it's important for us to make this work known so they build on it. They don't start from the ground, they start from already a base that we've laid. And what this means is that we must prepare for our movements, our work to always be under scrutiny, under critique, and always marginalized. In fact, as long as we are marginalized, we know we are challenging the center in a way that they can't yet accommodate, but which must continue. The challenge has to continue. That's our work. Our work is to remain the place from which challenge happens. Our work is not to get to the center, ever. And you might think I'm problematic in saying that, but I think we must always remain radical in that way. Because what is the radicalness that we are sitting in? We're sitting in the margins, and the margins are always people who are excluded. The margins are always the most vulnerable. So we must always be at that place. We must always be in their side. When we are in the center is when we have to think about who are we marginalizing, who has been left out of our circle of justice. And then we must move to that margin again and move from there to produce more justice for more people and expand that circle of justice. I don't think maybe they're not concrete ideas, but I think that orientation is also helpful for us. It's what keeps me doing what we do. Murki.
Yeah, I just want to precisely. I mean, Fatma said it extremely well and beautifully, and also Faqih. I would just echo actually what Fatma said, but what the way you frame the question, sometimes I don't. For me, I don't see. I think one needs to use the terms as suitable for the different contexts, and it doesn't mean that there's some kind of a discrepancy or a gap. You know, we are aware of the problems of feminism, as Fatma said, but we reclaim it. Now, in terms of the grassroots, certainly we use the not in an instrumentalist way, but in a sincere way, and you are already doing that, Kupi. You know, the language that speaks to the people. First of all, I think, in my view, Quranic ethics is very important. Even if people are not necessarily very religious, but because it highlights the importance of dignity, it highlights the importance of justice, it highlights the importance of a world that is better for everybody. That is in the Quranic ethics, and this is something that everybody wants to aspire to, everybody is entitled to. So if we start from there and highlight that and frame that consistently, then you are doing well. There will be challenges, but you're doing well. And for me, I think the most real challenge, is consistency. How not to get tired and to keep doing what you are doing, because it's very easy after a while to get tired from the movement building, from being involved in this kind of work. That is the most important thing: consistency, and keep going at it. Yeah.
Istiqomah.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, I think we run out of time, because now it's 5 past 3:32. So I'm not going to summarize our discussion. It's very rich and thoughtful presentation, and also the discussion with the audience, with the participants here. So on behalf of Asylum Center for Islamic Law and Ethics of Mubadalah, KUPI, and also Aman Indonesia, Kupipedia, Mubadalah.id, I would like to thank our distinguished speakers, Dr. Fatima and Dr. Mulki, for sharing your scholarship and reflection with us today. And I also thank everyone who joined us and contributed to this discussion. This session concludes our ongoing series on the special issue of African Journal of Gender and Religion on the Congress of Indonesian Women Ulama. But we still hope that you still continue and following up with our another series and also future collaboration. Thank you once again, and wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.
Waalaikumsalam
Waalaikumsalam, and thank you
warahmatullahi
so much for the
wabarakatuh.
invitation.
Yeah,
you so
thank
Thank
you
you,
so much,
Mulki. Thank
Dr.
you,
Thank you,
Mulki.
Fatima.
Fakih. Take
Yeah.
care.
Thank you, Ibu
Assalamualaikum.
Mulki, Ibu
Thank
Fatima.
you.
Assalamualaikum.